This will be a talk about wordplay. I'm going to wait until 11 o'clock to actually start, which will be soon. Okay. So I'm Ed Pegg Jr., and welcome to the 23rd edition of Mathematical Games. And today I'll be talking about anagrams, letter banks, and other wordplay. This series is an homage to Martin Gardner, who ran a column called Mathematical Games in Scientific American for 25 years. And myself and many others were highly motivated by his columns because he made mathematics and other things fun and interesting. So that's one of the main reasons I became a mathematician, was because of Martin Gardner's columns. And in one of his columns, actually quite a few columns, he talked about wordplay. And he actually missed something. In this second paragraph here, he talks about Frederick Wood being executed by the electric chair. And Wood made a pun about, you'll see the effects of electricity on wood. However, there's much more interesting wordplay that Martin Gardner missed. And I'll be getting into that in a few minutes. So, what is wordplay? That's basically when you found something interesting within the letters of a word. And we have many demonstrations at demonstrations.wolfram.com. We have quite a few things on words. Quite a few of the things that are in this talk I'm going to turn into demonstrations. So you'll have a reference for some of these anagrams, letter banks, and other things that I've put together. So one of the first things you want for making these big programmatic searches for wordplay is to have a good word list. And that's an almost impossible thing to do, to have a perfect word list. There's always going to be something better you can do to tweak it. You can do better scoring. I'll talk about scoring in a bit. If you're just using Mathematica, there are several word lists that you can use, and you can join them together. There's something called a word list and word data. And together, they have 180,000 words. However, it's also possible to get bigger word lists, and I will have a download link that will be provided when the talk is online. And the size of this bigger word list has almost 100,000 entries. So here's some samples of some of the things in that big word list. Wash table, plastometric, bobby soxers. There's in any really, really big word list, there are going to be words, names, and phrases and things you've never heard about before. And you probably will find most of them boring. That's called obscure stuff. And one of the things when you're making a good puzzle or crossword or trying to make an interesting list, you want to avoid the really obscure stuff, because sometimes it just seems like you're putting letters together. If we try to make a list of all the items on Amazon and all the company names, well, a lot of company names now are just random letters strung together, because most of the good names are taken. Even the things that just sound reasonably good have been taken. So right now they're just going to random stuff, random character strings, like you might see in a password. It might be interesting to do a study on those. One thing with a word list is there's many different variations for any words. Like, for example, trade-off studies up here, there's likely something without the the without the hyphen. So removing diacritics and just getting down to the letters is important to eliminate some of the variations. While putting this talk together, there was one particular phrase that had over 1,000 different minor variations. And especially if there's something with dates, you're going to be seeing all the different dates dealing with that as well. So some of the notes on what you're going to be dealing with when you have a big word list. Any search takes several minutes or more, and it will always be done wrong the first few times. If it takes more than 5 minutes, there's faster code that you could write, but it'll be less convenient to use. Most results will look boring because of the obscurities. There are more obscure things than you could possibly know about. That's why they're obscure. A large word list always has mistakes and is always improvable. I know some people that have been working on word lists for 50 years now. Your first, second, and third searches could have been done better. That's just something you'll need to accept. And dictionaries and encyclopedias are amazing, and it's always good to have an excuse to use them. That's one of the reasons I like looking for nice wordplay items, is because I get to look things up to decide whether or not they're obscure. So let's see here. Words that don't repeat a letter. So we can start that with the mathematical word lists, and we basically sort by string length, and then we do my letters only thing to remove diacritics and other things, spaces. And it turns out these are the long entries that don't repeat a letter. Dermatoglyphics is body patterns. Buckthorn family, I actually have no idea what buckthorn is because I haven't looked it up. Measuring block, pitcher's mound, bowstring hemp. These are all things that don't repeat a letter. I forget who Clyde Tombaugh is. I'm vaguely thinking he's the one who discovered Pluto, but that's probably wrong. If you have any comments, feel free to post them in the YouTube chat. Let's see. We can also look at the bigger word list that has nearly 100,000 items, and these give more interesting things, including things that usually aren't good to mention in a mathematical talk. Crazy Stupid Love is a movie. Dregs of Humanity, Glows in the Dark. These are all mostly interesting phrases. Top Gun Maverick was a blockbuster last year. It's surprising that that doesn't repeat a letter. I have my doubts. Jacks in the Box, Knight's Problem is a good math problem. So there's quite a few more interesting things in this bigger word list, like Rhapsody in Blue. And there's lots of these that don't repeat a letter. If anybody spots anything really interesting in here, feel free to post it. And most of these are longer than dermatoglyphics, which is kind of thought of as one of the longest, that with uncopyrightables up here. So we can also go to an even larger list. We can go to all the entries of Wikipedia, and I've got a download link that will be in the chat when it's posted on community. And it has almost 4 million terms in it. Here's some random entries in it. And I basically, here's the main entry, like architecture of St. Louis. And before that is just the letters in order. And after that is a score. These are the scores of how obscure an item is. If it has a rank of 100, then it's pretty much most people know it. Or it's a link that gets a lot of traffic. If it's low rank, like a 3, then almost nobody has heard of it. I have no idea what non-calorie subdivision is. or it's just something too specific, like the 2013 Superbike World Championship has a 6. Probably nobody has gone to that page in 10 years. So we can do this again and find the longest entries in Wikipedia that don't repeat a letter. And the two top ones are the alphabet and the typewriter keys. One thing noted by Gardner in his wordplay column is that the top row of the typewriter spells out the letters of typewriter. The biggest items are McKnight Boulevard and Alfred P. Southwick, who is the person who invented the electric chair. So Martin Gardner should have pointed out Alfred P. Southwick invented the electric chair right after the second paragraph of his wordplay column, and mentioned that his name doesn't repeat any letters, which is highly unusual. In fact, it's the longest, except for the alphabet, the longest entry in Wikipedia that doesn't repeat a letter. And Alfred P. Southwick invented the electric chair in, I think, 1888. And we can see more of these things here. Most of the rest of these things I've never heard of. Big Flats, New York was used on NPR in the Will Shortz puzzle just a few weeks ago due to a puzzle by David Dickerson. So here's Alfred P. Southwick. He was also a dentist. And we can look him up in Wikipedia data, and it has information on him. So a ranked word list, values from 1 to 100. The higher the ranking, the more less likely is you've heard about it. So Queen Elizabeth has 100. Christian Bale from Batman has 100. Conjuring, Karl Marx, The Rise of Skywalker. Yeah, most of these, Scooby-Doo, are pretty well-known items. And here's a few items with a rank of 0. Television chef. I've heard of some television chefs, but this probably isn't a popular entry. Battle in 5 seconds. Most of these I haven't heard of before. So the ones are mostly obscure. So one of the things invented by Will Shortz is what's called the letter bank, where you've got a set of letters, like the letters of lens, and then you reuse them as often as you want to make a longer word. Like senselessness, it comes out of lens. Pencil sharpener, you can do Sir Charles Spencer Champlin. Manicures, you can do Neiman Marcus or marine insurance. And here's one I found. With horse taming, you can get, am I missing something here? Get in someone's hair, get something straight. And the rest of these. So to produce these, we start by using the word list, and we've got the various letters, and we build up a list of banks. For example, for the word goldfish, it has these letters in that order. We're basically looking for words that don't repeat a letter to be valid banks for longer words and phrases. And once we've got that built, we can go back and forth. We can start with the sorted bank and find the word that goes with it. And eventually you'll have things like this here, countervails that have many different terms associated with it. National Volunteers Association, for example. This code up here, define the groupings. This is code that I've written many times, so I finally decided I would just write a function to do this for me, to basically, once I've made a list of all the various terms, basically I've, for each phrase in the word list, I've got the sorted letters in order without repeats. And then I basically grouped them based on whatever that was. Then I reversed it to get back to the word that was used for that bank. So here's various examples. Trampolines, you can get mental representation. Countries, counter-terrorist center. and this goes on and on. I've got a much longer list that I'll be posting with this. Oh, that's an interesting one. Slang term is a letter bank of gentleman's agreement. Supergiant, Sagittarius serpentarius, the secretary bird. Um, um, some of these I've used for puzzles, including that one. Let's see. And we can go to bigger word lists. For example, we can go to the Wikipedia word list. And I basically use the same process. And I've got some of these lists that I've produced are actually going to be stored in the notebook I'll put online. So this is the best for Wikipedia entries if you strip out all the items with dates. It in Spectral will make all of these various things. Anything really interesting in here? I don't know what tangle orchids are, but it can make third generation console. I like this one. I'm not scared. I think that's probably a music title, but I didn't look it up, so I don't know what it is. When you produce these lists, there's usually a good reason to look things up so that you know what the items are, so it's not obscure to you anymore. And it can make things like common carotid arteries. Minutes of arc is a good longitudinal and latitudinal term. But most of the entries it makes, except maybe streams of consciousness or tourist information center, aren't that interesting. And musical note can make telecommunication satellite in addition to these other things. So to build these letter banks, here's basically the process that I used. And once we get the sorted banks, we run into a problem that member queue, whether something is in this list of 3 million items, takes a long time to finish for one item. And we need to finish it for 1 million items. So member queue and position are too slow to work with really long lists many times. So to speed that up, I basically did a split by the first two characters to make shorter lists. And that basically speeds the search process up by a factor of about 600. And then I built an index. So index member queue and by index position is something I use to get through these gigantic word lists and apply search procedures to everything in the list. So basically, instead of a million times a million complexity, which would have taken me too long to do the search, I divided that by about 1 million. So it was just going through 1 million terms, which took about an hour. Instead of, it would have taken years if I hadn't adjusted the code. So once I stripped Wikipedia down to something reasonable, I basically decided to skip everything with an obscurity of less than 30. Because that basically sped up my search by about half. And then we can look for items that have this is just a random sample. Charles I. DuPont is a good letter bank, but this isn't that interesting. And I should have stripped out the dates early. That's a lesson to myself. And this is the letter bank wiki, which I'll be publishing as a demonstration. And this list is also going to be in the community link eventually. So the highest scoring item in Wikipedia was Tenacious D, being a letter bank of the United States Constitution. And you can see some of these other high ranking ones here. Disney Vault, United States Navy SEALs. Maybe Disney should do a movie about the SEALs. I'm not sure who Austin Prohl is. I should have looked him up. Gila Monster, Letterbank of MGM Resorts International. I don't know who Ifrit Payton is. A lot of these people I should have looked up. I'm not sure why Star Trek. That's probably some pun group. Anything? Siphon Filter is a pretty good game. Kingdom Hearts is a good game, but I've never heard of this here. So I've never seen Kong the animated series. So these are some of the high-ranking letter banks. So that means that basically all the other big letter banks rank worse than this. I wish I knew who Kendra Smith was, because this is a pretty nice item here, Star Trek the Animated Series. So with the groupings and basically these are some of the steps I took to produce the list earlier. Nimrod Castle is looks like an interesting, you can do Reed Solomon error correction. But there's many terms that deal with this. And one thing you can spot in here is there's various weird things like a tilde. This is earlier in the process when I realized when I hadn't cleaned up the word list I was working with enough. There's always something more you can do to clean up a word list, but often that takes time, and sometimes you don't want to repeat the process to clean things up again, especially when it takes an hour to do something. So there's several different types of anagrams. The way the National Puzzlers League defines it is that a straight anagram has to be apt. For example, they see the eyes. The word or phrase is an appropriate comment or description when the letters are rearranged. So the other thing, which is going to be on the next page, is a transposal where you're rearranging the letters and you don't care whether they have anything to do with each other. Aptness is difficult to quantify, though. I tried some AI searches with this, and the AIs didn't do very well at all. Anagramy.com is a good anagram site, and many of the examples I use in this talk are from the National Puzzlers League site, puzzlers.org. I've been a member since 1978. Will Schwartz is the one who got me into the Puzzlers League. Let's see. Here's one thing when you're making an anagram is based on your input string. For example, if we were working with Prestissimo, one thing is to find all the words in your word list that use those letters. So this is a piece of code that will find subwords of Prestissimo, and here's the list of words that it will produce. So armed with that list, you could try to find words that might relate to Prestissimo, and you might find times, tempo, and these other things. So one thing I'm thinking about doing is to make a list of a few hundred interesting phrases that have not appeared on Anagrammy, put them through this process, have an AI look for terms that relate to the starting word, and then seeing if I can do interesting anagrams. Transposals, it's just a different ordering with no relation. Earl of Coventry probably did have an olfactory nerve, but these are not related terms. There's special transposals. Sometimes you just reverse the orders of the letter, like stress backwards, desserts backwards is stress, Gateman backwards is name tag. So one of the longest reversals in the Wolfram word list, and we've got some here. Deliver, reviled is one. Sumatra Artemis. To order, red root. But I accidentally left in the straight palindromes like race car. So I remove those when I look to the bigger word list. Palindromes and simordilaps. This is a made-up word, but it's defined in Wikipedia. I did not know what Esiotrot was, so I looked it up, and it's a book by Roald Dahl about a tortoise, and he just spelled tortoise backwards to come up with the title of the book. Delbert, troubled. I'm not sure what Delbert is. Delian, snailed. I'm not sure what Delians is. Yeah, some of these I don't know. Delord, I don't know. Dennets. Always a good reason to look things up. Head to tail shift is where you move the first letter to the end. Most of these don't look all that interesting, though I do like swordplay and word plays. Slaughter, laughters is a well-known one. But most of these just deal with the letter S. It's often good to, for a particular item, like a head to tail shift, there's often something trivial that will make your output look worse. In this case, I should have redone the search to leave out the S shift, since most of these involve plurals at the end. This would be a more interesting list if I took those out. Whenever you do a search, you've always done it wrong the first few times. A strict transposal has entries with the same letters, but usually you want them mixed. So a first search, just looking at the terms, we get, for example, U.S. Army Criminal Intelligence, U.S. Army Criminal Investigation. It's the same thing. There's just a few dots added. Most of these are just minor variations of each other. They're pretty much the same thing. It's best if all those get stripped out when you're looking at a result. So one method that's often used is to look at the trigrams within the terms. And that's a trigram is a group of three letters, like the trigrams of abnormalities are ABN, BNO, NOR, and so forth. And a string partition will find the trigrams of a word. So most of these are actually fairly interesting. Abnormalities, normalization, cryptomeres, spectrometry, disintegration, disorientating. Most of these anagrams here are somewhat interesting. They're all well mixed, and many of the terms are things I've heard of. Like I've heard of harmonicas and maraschino cherries. One of the items here is Christmas Tree Lane and thermal resistance, and this is me at Christmas Tree Lane. And this is a transposal I did a while ago, or somewhere down here. Here's Christmas Tree Lane, thermal resistance down here. Circles the Wagon wrestling coaches is an interesting one. So these are some of the long, well mixed transposals in my larger word list. And most of these look pretty good. That's because I didn't use the Wikipedia list, which has much more in terms of obscure things. L'Hôpital's rule, plural phallus, is one I hadn't seen before. But there's still weird things in it, like this a tilde thing is something I need to figure out when I redo this the next time. And down here, these characters shouldn't be here. So I made a mistake somewhere in my filtering. So we can make a list of the long transposals in Wikipedia, and here's a demonstration I've started putting together. The longest well mixed one seems to be, well, this list actually has had a mistake in it, so I need to redo it. The longest I know of is turbocharged diesel engines and Bering Sea gold under the ice. So when I redo it, that one will be at the top. But number 2 is North Charleston Coliseum and Southern Marsh Collection, which I've never heard of. These two terms I've both heard of. Super NES Classic Edition is a nice game system that came out a few years ago, and there's an anagram of presidential succession. So these are some of the other big, long anagrams. And in these columns here, you get the obscurity ranking. You want a high rank for something to be something well-known, like general practitioner. If it has a low rank, like 29, Agostino Cardamon, I have no idea who that is. The lower the score, the more obscure it is. But I will soon have a demonstration that has many of these interesting long anagrams in Wikipedia. I'll need to remove the similar items. This is a triple anagram, but these two things are the same thing. We'll see. Oh, this is a nice one. Moonshine War, Horse with No Name. These two are pretty much the same item. So here's a triple down here. The World Is Mine, Louis Trondheim, and Meredith Wilson. So I need to do more cleanup on this list before I can publish it. Okay, did I have something before? No, I didn't. One thing that helps with figuring out if things are different is to look at their enumeration. For example, Accent Local Prentice has an enumeration of 4248. And another thing I looked at was doing the Venn diagram of the words. For example, Mathematica and Chambermaid, if you take a look at how the letters intersect, they both share all these letters in the middle. If you take those letters out, Mathematica has A, T, and T left over, and Chambermaid has B, R, and D left over. So A, B, C, D, E, F, and D, E, F, G, H, I. A, B, C is unique to the first, D, E, F is shared, and G, H, I is only in the second. So two terms like creditworthiness and biotechnologies share these letters, and these are the left and right complements. We can also take a look at their sound characters, creditworthiness and biotechnologies, and these are the shared sounds between the two words. Now, it turns out that creditworthiness and biotechnologies are two of the longest sound words that don't repeat a sound. And I'll get to how I did that later. We can use string then to check two anagrams like Super NES, Classic Edition, and Presidential Succession. There's no left to right complement except for the spaces. This had just one space. This one has 3 spaces. So this shows up with having extra spaces. And here I actually do have the longest anagram in Wikipedia. Bering Sea Gold Under the Ice and Turbocharged Diesel Engine. And there's a check that it's an actual anagram or transposal in the NPL lingo. A heteronym is words or phrases with the same spelling but different meanings. Let's make those a bit bigger. For example, Bangor, Bach Event, I Rely. If you take those letters, it also makes ban Gorbachev entirely. That was a flat that was in the NPL publication, The Enigma. Mount St. Helens and Mount Stalins. These have the same letters in the same order, but they have different meanings. And we could try to find things like that in the word lists. However, most of these just don't work that well. They're basically the same thing, except this one up here, be a thing and bethene. This is actually a very obscure word though. So it's valid, but it's not interesting because bethene is too obscure. Most of these are just basically taking out a space to make the same word again. So I need to redo my thinking on how to find interesting heteronyms. And alternate is where you take alternate letters of the same word, like school. You can make shoe and cold if you take every other letter. So I wondered if there were any interesting alternates that weren't known. And I wrote a lot of code for that. I'll leave that closed, but I realized later I could have done it in an easier way, but I never wrote the new code because the results weren't that interesting. Dr. Einstein makes Denti and Risen, but Denti is obscure. Most of these have one good word and one bad word. Um, so nothing here is all that spectacular in my mind. But there's quite a few things here. I didn't completely look through this list. I mostly looked at the items at the top, so maybe there's something nice in here that I missed. An interlac is when you strike out letters. Oops. Harry says, is my voice better now? Is where you strike out letters of one word to get another word. Oh, that shouldn't be in there. So here's some samples from the big word list. And I'm basically looking for items that will be in the same order. So index member queue will look for items that are in my split up list. So I basically set that up so I can do this larger search on the word orate. I wanted to find the words that have had orate in that order, and when you struck those letters of orates out, it would give a new word. So here are the results, and unfortunately, most of the terms end in orate, so it wasn't quite as nice as I wanted, and others are usually there's an obscure term or both are obscure, but there's a few nice things in here like Hurley and hourly rate, um, gasp and gas operated. So some of the items that come out of here are nice, but it took quite a few works just to do one word, so I need to speed up the code before I do it for a much longer word list. But that's something I plan to do. Then there's a reverse. If you're given a word, is there an alternate or not? What is that called? An interlock. Is there an interlock for conversations? So first find all the words in order in the word conversations, and then find the words that are in order. So conversation, you can strike out various letters to get a word, and then look for the words that when you strike something out, a correct word is looked over. So the sat and conversion is nice, but the best one seems to be covers and nations. And you can see that covers and nations do interlock in that word. So I want to do a search on that as well. Letter changes, wither and either if you change the first letter, boast, beast, blast if you change the second letter, golden gloves, golden globes if you change the third to the last. We can also change sounds like tungsten and tungster, change the last sound. You can also do things like move and change a letter, like Chuck E. Cheese. You can move and change one letter to get Chuck GC, which is the region making up the Bering Strait. We can also do things like remove the first and last sounds to get a new word, like quarantine. If you take out the first and last sounds, you get warranty. So I didn't come up with a good method for finding letter changes because most of the letter changes are too trivial, and I didn't find a good way of removing the trivial stuff in a big search. So I need to figure out how to do that. There's certain letter changes that are specialized. So aspirin and aspirin is one. These are revelry and reveal is have one sound removed. I didn't come up with a good method for searching these either. But with sounds, one thing you'll want is a good sound word list. And this is the best one I've been able to find, the CMU Pronouncing Dictionary. I give a link here. And I did the search, and these are the terms that have the longest items with no repeated sounds: biotherapeutics, transsexuals, creditworthiness, corresponding lead, and biotechnologies. Are all long terms that don't repeat a sound. Here's a sample of what items in that word list look like. It has a specialized alphabet for how the sounds are represented, and CMU has a guide for how all these sounds relate to the IPA alphabet. So one thing I want to do is make a program that translates the CMU dictionary into an IPA format. It has 134,000 terms, and here's a comparison to word data, which misses many pronunciations. So here's just a random sample of 30 terms, and only the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of 30 have pronunciations. But we can filter out of word data. If you just want to use Mathematica, we can filter out the almost 30,000 terms that have pronunciations. So here's a random sampling of these. We've got the first term unconverted, and here's unconverted in IPA, International Phonetic Alphabet. Once we've got a sound dictionary, a sound word list, we can look for various things. First, though, a consonancy. Two more words or phrases that share the same consonants. Beachmaster, biochemistry have the same consonants in the same order: acorn, crayon, ocarina. Trigrams come in useful here again. For example, the trigrams of Beachmaster and biochemistry, there's 9 trigrams that are distinct between the two. So that's pretty good. We can basically start doing a search and then separate out the ones that are distinct from each other. There's still some errors in this word list, though. I don't know who this is, and it's got some characters, but authenticness and thanatosthenosis looks interesting. Quite a few interesting looking consonancies in this Candy Mountain combination. So I need to redo this to remove the errors first. And I mentioned sounds, train seals, strained eel, Morse code, course mode. You can also do a triple tall Tennessee ales, all Tennessee jails. What items in word data are phonetic spoonerisms? So first we want to split up the words and then look for ones where both words have phonetic forms. For example, bacterial plaque, etymological dictionary. So once you've found out which ones might work, we can apply those to IPA exists and then look for the terms that will actually work for Spoonagrams. And this is the list I came up with. Baby minder, maybe binder. Oops. And these all look relatively reasonable. Blowing glass, blowing bass. Let's see if we can get past the bees. Dark bread, bark bread. So this is one of the demonstrations I'll eventually be posting for examples of spoonergrams out of our word list. There's also on community, we've got an interesting analysis of the New York Times Spelling Bee Challenge. And when I saw that, I thought it might be interesting to do a talk on wordplay. And I thought I would put in a crossword, mathematical gaming, and thanks for listening. So that ends my talk. Most of the entries in here are well scored. So most of these terms in here, like Sudoku and assess, are familiar terms. Assess is a word that would get a lower score in a crossword because it has all common letters. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to post them in the chat area, and I'll be glad to try to answer them. And all of this will be posted sometime soon if you'd like to look at my word list or some of the results I've gotten. Oh, so if that's all, many thanks for attending my talk.